The kick came fast. Henry Cole, a single father, crumpled to the diner floor, humiliated by Rosalind Veil, a woman whose designer heel had just dug into his stomach. Sauce stained her red dress. His dignity was shattered, and his job, his lifeline to 7-year-old Louisa, hung by a thread. Rosalind, arrogant and dismissive, never noticed the quiet man in the corner booth, Corbin Ward, who folded his napkin, left a $20 bill, and walked out. But Corbin had seen everything. His phone already dialing, a quiet promise of justice began to form, unbeknownst to Henry, about to lose everything, or Rosalind oblivious to the storm gathering around her. The cold seeped into the third-floor apartment, an unwelcome guest. Henry Cole pulled a thin blanket tighter around his sleeping daughter Louisa, whose small form barely made a dent in the worn mattress. It was well before dawn, the hour when the city still held its breath, and Henry was already on his feet. He moved with a quiet efficiency born of years of practice, preparing a meager breakfast of toast and instant oatmeal. Louisa, 7 years old, stirred as he bent to kiss her forehead, her hand reaching out for her worn teddy bear. "Daddy, don't go," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. He forced a smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his tired eyes. "Just a quick shift, sweetheart. I'll be back before you know it." The radiator in the corner clanked a futile protest against the chill, a reminder of the landlord Bernie's unanswered calls. On the faded kitchen calendar, a circle around rent due 5 days seemed to glow with ominous light. Every dollar mattered. Every moment of his day was a calculation of survival. The harbor diner hummed with the predictable symphony of the lunch rush. The scent of burned coffee, old grease, and frying onions hung heavy in the air. Henry, 30-something but looking older, navigated the narrow aisles with the grace of a seasoned professional. He had worked here for 3 years, a quiet, almost invisible presence, known for his efficiency and his ability to anticipate a customer's needs before they even spoke. George, the diner manager, a man with thinning hair and a perpetual frown of worry, moved nervously behind the counter. This was Henry's stage, a place where he kept his head down and survived providing for Louisa. Then she walked in. Rosalind Veil was a jarring splash of crimson against the diner's muted palette, her expensive red dress clinging to her slender frame, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm against the chipped tile floor. She was perhaps in her mid-20s, with dark glossy hair pulled back from sharp cheekbones and a designer purse that likely cost more than Henry earned in half a year. She moved with an air of entitlement, as if the diner and everyone in it existed solely for her convenience. She chose a booth by the window, crossed her legs with a practiced ease, and immediately became absorbed in her handheld device, not bothering to glance up as Henry approached. "Good afternoon," he said quietly. "Can I get you something to drink?" She merely waved a dismissive hand, her fingers still gliding across the screen. "Water, no ice. And make sure the glass is clean." Henry nodded a silent acknowledgement of her arrogance and returned to the counter. He selected a freshly washed glass, filled it with filtered water, checked it for smudges, and brought it back to her table. Still, she did not look at him. He gently placed the glass before her. "Are you ready to order?" Her response was a sigh heavy with annoyance. "The grilled chicken salad dressing on the side. And if there's even a hint of wilted lettuce, I'm sending it back." Henry silently jotted down the order, clipped it to the kitchen board, and moved on to the next table. He thought no more of her until the order was ready. The plate looked impeccable: chicken grilled to perfection, lettuce, crisp dressing, and a small separate cup. He picked up the tray, holding it with both hands, and approached her booth with caution. "Your salad," he announced softly. Rosalind finally glanced up, her eyes flicking over the plate, then over him, a cold, dismissive appraisal. As Henry placed the plate down, she waved her hand in the air, gesturing at something on her screen. The motion was sudden, careless. Her wrist caught the edge of the tray. The small cup of dressing tipped. It happened in an instant, a blur of motion and liquid. The red sauce splashed across the table onto the edge of her dress across her lap. A high-pitched scream sliced through the diner's ambient noise, cutting the chatter into sudden shocked silence. Every head turned. Henry froze the tray still in his hand, the sauce dripping from the table onto the floor. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Rosalind shrieked, her voice sharp and furious. She sprang to her feet, knocking her chair backward. The crimson stain spread across the fabric of her expensive dress. She looked down at it, then up at Henry, her face contorted with pure, unadulterated rage. "I'm so sorry," Henry stammered, setting the tray down and reaching for a napkin. "I'll clean it up. I'll pay for the dry cleaning. You'll what?" she snapped, snatching the napkin from his hand and flinging it onto the table. "Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? Do you—" Henry's mouth opened, but no words came out. He could feel every pair of eyes in the diner on him, a weight of silent judgment. His hands trembled. "I'm really sorry." He repeated, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "It was an accident. I'll do whatever I can to fix it." She stepped closer, her heels making her seem even taller. She looked down at him as if he were something vile, something she had scraped from her shoe. "You're pathetic," she hissed. Then the kick came. Her heel drove into his stomach with brutal force, knocking the air from his lungs. He staggered backward, clutching his side, his legs giving out. He hit the floor hard, the impact rattling through his bones. He lay there, struggling to breathe, the world tilting precariously. The diner was utterly silent. He looked up. Rosalind stood over him, arms crossed, her face twisted with cold disgust, a look of grim satisfaction. "Get him out of here," she ordered loudly, her gaze fixed on George, the manager. George, a short man with thinning hair and a nervous gait, emerged from behind the counter, his eyes darting between Henry on the floor and Rosalind in the red dress. "Ma'am, I'm sure we can—" "I want him fired." She cut him off, her voice cold and clear. "Right now, or I'm calling my lawyer, and this place will be shut down by the end of the week." George swallowed, his face pale. "Ma'am, please let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," she retorted, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "Either he's gone or I make sure everyone knows what kind of trash you hire here." Henry pushed himself up onto his knees, his ribs aching, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "George, I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'll apologize. I'll pay for the dress. Just don't—" "Shut up," Rosalind commanded, not even looking at him. George stared at Henry for a long moment, then at Rosalind, then at the stained floor. "Henry, go home," he said quietly. Henry's stomach dropped. "George, please. I need this job. Go home." George repeated, his voice firmer now. "We'll talk later." Rosalind smiled, a small, triumphant curve of her lips. She turned and walked toward the door, her heels clicking a final victorious rhythm before the door swung shut behind her. Henry remained on the floor for a few more seconds, then slowly rose to his feet, his hands still shaking, his side throbbing. He glanced around the diner. A few people still stared, but most had returned to their meals, averting their gaze. No one spoke a word. Henry walked to the back room, took off his apron, and exited through the rear door. The cold alley air embraced him. He leaned his back against the brick wall, breath pluming in the chill. He closed his eyes, trying to think, to make sense of the sudden, brutal shift in his world. He had $43 in his wallet. Rent was $450. Louisa needed new shoes. The heater in their apartment had stopped working 2 days ago. He had no idea what he was going to do. What he did not know was that someone had been watching. Corbin Ward, a man who had sat in the corner booth, had seen everything: Rosalind's careless wave, the sauce spill, the brutal kick, Henry's fall. When Rosalind left, Corbin had folded his napkin, placed a $20 bill on the table, and walked out. He now stood on the sidewalk, hands in his coat pockets, watching Rosalind climb into a black car and drive away. Then he looked back at the diner, pulled out his phone, and made a call. "Yeah, it's me," he said. "I need you to run a name for me." He spoke Rosalind's name, then rattled off the license plate number. He hung up and walked to his own car. Henry did not see him. Henry saw nothing but the crushing weight of his desperate situation, wondering how he would ever explain this to Louisa. Henry did not go home right away. He sat in his car in the diner parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, his ribs still aching, his hands still trembling. The kick, the floor. George's face, the stares of the customers, it all replayed in a relentless loop. He longed to call someone, but there was no one left. His parents had passed years ago. He had no siblings. His few friends from before had drifted away when his life spiraled. There was only Louisa, and he would not tell her what had just happened. Not yet. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he started the car and drove toward their dilapidated apartment building, a structure that felt as weary as he did. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, its thin walls and stained carpet echoing years of neglect. The landlord, Bernie, had ceased returning calls about the broken heater. Louisa was waiting, perched on the couch with a coloring book, her legs tucked under her. She looked up as Henry entered, her innocent eyes full of expectation. "You're home early," she observed. Henry forced a smile, a brittle facade. "Yeah, slow day." Louisa studied him for a moment, her crayon hovering over the page. She was far too smart for her 7 years, always sensing when something was amiss. "Are you okay, Dad?" she asked. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. She did not look convinced yet. She returned to her coloring. Henry walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, his hand still shaking. He leaned against the counter, closed his eyes, and tried to steady his ragged breathing. The following morning, George called. Henry answered on the 2nd ring, a knot tightening in his stomach. A long, heavy silence stretched between them before George finally spoke. "Henry, I need you to come in. We need to talk." Henry's stomach clenched. "When?" he asked. "Now, if you can." Henry drove back to the diner. The parking lot was empty save for George's car. He walked through the front door. George sat in a booth, his hands folded on the table, looking utterly exhausted, older than the day before. Henry sat across from him. "What's going on?" George avoided his gaze. "That woman," he began quietly. "She's been making calls. She told people you assaulted her." Henry felt the floor drop out from under him, his throat suddenly dry. "What?" he croaked. "She publicly stated you touched her." George continued, his voice flat, emotionless. "That you made her uncomfortable. That she had to defend herself." Henry's mouth went dry. "That's not true. You were there. You saw what happened." George finally met Henry's gaze, his eyes red-rimmed. "I know," he admitted, "but it doesn't matter. She's got lawyers. She's got money, and she's threatening to sue the diner if I don't let you go." Henry stared at him, the words initially meaningless, then crashing down with brutal clarity. "You're firing me." He stated not a question. George offered no reply, none was needed. Henry rose, his chair scraping loudly across the floor. "I didn't do anything," he declared, his voice rising. "You know I didn't do anything." "I know," George reiterated, "but I can't afford a lawsuit. I'm sorry." Henry left without another word, got in his car, and drove with no destination in mind, just the desperate need to escape. He eventually pulled over to the side of the road, the engine still running, his mind reeling. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. A notification appeared from a messaging application, one he rarely used. Someone had tagged him in a widespread statement. He opened it. The public statement was from her Rosalind Veil. Her name, previously unknown to him, was now everywhere. The public statement included a picture of her dress stained with sauce. The accompanying words declared, "This man assaulted me today at Harbor Diner. He put his hands on me, and when I told him to stop, he became aggressive. Women are not safe anywhere. Please circulate this so others know to avoid this place." The statement had been widely distributed hundreds of times. The accompanying responses were even worse. He should be arrested. What a creep. I hope he loses his job. Henry turned off his phone. He sat there for a long time, the weight of public condemnation crushing him. Then, with a heavy heart, he drove home. The eviction notice arrived 2 days later, taped to the apartment door as Henry returned from dropping Louisa off at school. He pulled it down, his eyes scanning the stark words twice. The landlord, Bernie, demanded he pay the overdue rent within 5 days or vacate the apartment. The total owed was $920. Henry had $63 in his bank account. He crumpled the paper in a fit of despair, then smoothed it out. Louisa could not see this, could not know. He began a frantic search for work that afternoon, filling out applications at 3 other diners, a grocery store, and a gas station. None of them called back. By the end of the week, the grim truth settled upon him. Rosalind's public statements had spread his name, now irrevocably attached to the accusations. No one wanted to hire him. He tried calling George again, but the manager did not answer. He tried calling the few people whose numbers he still possessed. No one picked up. He was utterly, terrifyingly alone. On the 4th day, Rosalind returned to the diner. Henry was not there, having not been back since George had fired him, but George recounted the incident later. She had walked in with 2 friends, laughing loudly, acting as if nothing untoward had ever occurred. She ordered food. She sat in the very same booth where the incident had taken place. She then posted another image, this time with a declaration stating, "Back at the scene of the crime, glad to see they finally got rid of the trash." George, consumed by fear, did not confront her. He served her. He smiled. He took her money. That night, Henry sat on the floor of his apartment, his back against the couch. The eviction notice, a stark white rectangle on the table before him. He stared at it until the words blurred into meaningless shapes. Louisa was asleep in the bedroom, her gentle breathing a stark contrast to the turmoil in his mind. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Henry Cole. He stared at the screen, not recognizing the number, almost choosing to ignore it. But he had nothing left to lose. He typed back, "Who is this?" The response was immediate. "A friend. Meet me tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. Corner of 8th and Lansing. Come alone." Henry read the message 3 times. It could have been anything. A deception, a threat, a mistake. But with everything already lost, he felt a desperate flicker of curiosity. The next morning, he left Louisa with the neighbor Bonnie and drove to the specified corner. It was a quiet part of town with a few small shops, a coffee place, and a laundromat. He parked across the street and waited. Precisely at 10 o'clock, a man approached Henry's car. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with short hair and a cleanly shaven face. He wore a dark jacket and jeans. He knocked on the window. Henry unlocked the door and the man slid into the passenger seat. A moment of silence passed between them before the man spoke. "You don't remember me, do you?" Henry looked at him, a faint sense of familiarity stirring, but he couldn't place the face. "Should I?" he asked. The man offered a slight smile. "Corbin Ward. We worked together about 6 years ago." The name hit Henry like a wave, a forgotten fragment of a different life. "Corbin?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Corbin nodded. "I heard what happened to you at the diner." Henry's jaw tightened, a familiar flush of anger. "How?" Corbin's gaze was steady. "I was there. I saw the whole thing." A profound realization bloomed within Henry. "You were there, corner booth," Corbin confirmed. "I saw her spill the sauce. I saw her kick you. I saw what she did." Henry leaned back in his seat, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "Then why didn't you say something?" He questioned, a hint of bitterness in his tone. Corbin's expression was unwavering. "Because I needed to be sure," he explained. "I needed to know who she was, what she was capable of." Henry's brow furrowed in confusion. What are you talking about? Corbin reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, handing it to Henry. Henry opened it, revealing printed screenshots, official reports, and documented incidents. Her name is Rosalind Veil, Corbin stated. She's been involved in at least 4 similar incidents over the past 2 years, assault harassment. She's gotten away with it every time because her family has money lawyers' connections. Henry flipped through the pages. Each one documented a different victim: Callista, a housekeeper; Elias, a delivery driver; Finn, a valet. All of them had been unjustly accused of something. All of them had subsequently lost their jobs. She does this. Corbin continued, his voice grave. She provokes people. She creates situations. Then she plays the victim, and she gets away with it. Henry closed the folder, his hands trembling with a mixture of shock and dawning fury. Why are you telling me this? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Corbin looked directly at him. Because this time she picked the wrong person, he said. And this time I have proof. Henry found himself at a loss for words. Corbin leaned forward, his tone urgent. I've been building a case, he revealed. But I need your help. I need you to file a formal complaint. I need you to go on record. Henry shook his head, the weight of his desperate circumstances pressing down on him. I can't. I've got a daughter. I've got no job, no money. If I go after her, she'll destroy me. Corbin's expression remained firm. She's already destroying you, he countered. The only difference is whether you fight back or not. Henry looked down at the folder in his lap, considering the terrifying odds. What if it doesn't work? He asked, his voice quiet with despair. Corbin paused for a moment. Then at least you tried. Henry sat there for a long time, the silence stretching. Then slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said quietly. What do I need to do? Corbin reached into his jacket once more, producing a card. Come to the station tomorrow, ask for me. We'll take your statement, and we'll start building this case the right way. Henry took the card. Corbin opened the door and stepped out of the car. He leaned back in. One more thing, he cautioned. She's not going to stop. She's going to keep coming after you, so be ready. He closed the door and walked away. Henry remained in his car for another 10 minutes, lost in thought before finally driving home. That night, Henry had a difficult conversation with Louisa. He sat her down and gently explained that they might have to move. Louisa's small face crumpled and tears welled in her eyes. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her small body trembling with fear. He held her close, whispering promises that everything would be okay. He did not know if it was true, but he spoke with a conviction he hoped she would believe, and that he too could hold on to. The next day, Henry went to the police station. Corbin met him at the front desk, his presence a steady anchor in Henry's turbulent world. They walked to a small interview room. Henry recounted everything: the spilled sauce, the brutal kick, the humiliating public statements, the relentless threats. Corbin meticulously recorded every detail, offering a subtle nod of encouragement now and then, his steady gaze providing a silent reassurance. When it was over, Corbin walked Henry back to the lobby. We're going to get her. Corbin stated, his voice firm with certainty. Henry desperately wanted to believe him, but a lifetime of hardship had taught him to temper hope with caution. He had stopped believing in easy victories a long time ago. 2 days later, Rosalind launched another attack. This time it was a carefully staged video. She appeared in her car, tears streaming down her face, her makeup streaked. She claimed Henry had been harassing her, following her, and that she feared for her life. The video circulated rapidly, hundreds of thousands of views and accompanying statements amplifying her manufactured distress. That same afternoon, Henry's landlord Bernie called. Bernie, his voice strained and apologetic, informed Henry he had 24 hours to vacate the apartment. Henry packed everything they owned into 2 suitcases and 4 cardboard boxes. He and Louisa moved into a motel on the edge of town, a nondescript building with flickering neon lights. It cost $40 a night. Henry had enough money for 3 nights. Their already precarious existence had been brutally publicly shattered once more. On the 3rd night in the motel, a hollow exhaustion settled over Henry. The cramped room felt even smaller, the air thick with unspoken fear. Louisa was asleep on the narrow bed, her innocent face a heartbreaking contrast to the grim reality. Henry placed his head in his hands, feeling utterly defeated, the weight of his desperate situation crushing him. A knock sounded on the door. Henry opened it to find Corbin standing there, his expression hard, his gaze sweeping the sparse room. "We need to talk." Corbin stated, his voice low. Henry let him in. Louisa, stirred by the noise, woke briefly, her eyes fluttering open before she drifted back to sleep. Corbin's presence filled the small space, a stark reminder of the battle they were fighting. "She filed a restraining order," Corbin announced, his voice flat. Henry felt the world tilt precariously. "Against me? What?" he stammered, disbelief warring with terror. "She's claiming you're stalking her," Corbin explained. "She's got photos, fabricated timestamps, false locations." Henry sank onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "I haven't been anywhere near her." Corbin nodded. "I know the photos are staged. The timestamps don't match, but it's going to take time to prove that." Henry felt a suffocating sense of futility. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered, his voice raw with despair. Corbin crouched down in front of him, his eyes steady, unwavering. "Yes, you can," he said firmly, "because tomorrow we're going to arrest her." Henry looked up, a bewildered "What?" escaping his lips. Corbin stood, his voice ringing with a newfound certainty. "We've got enough. The video from the diner, the other victims who are willing to come forward, the fake restraining order. It's enough." Henry stared at him, the words slowly sinking in a glimmer of light in the overwhelming darkness. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice hoarse with a fragile hope. Corbin nodded, his resolve clear. "I'm sure." Henry felt a powerful surge of emotion, a mix of disbelief and overwhelming relief. He looked over at Louisa, still peacefully asleep, her small chest rising and falling softly. "What happens now?" he asked. Corbin walked toward the door. "Now you get some rest," he said. "And tomorrow we end this." He left. Henry sat on the edge of the bed watching his daughter sleep, and for the first time in weeks he allowed himself to hope. The arrest happened at noon the next day. Henry was not there to witness it. Corbin had instructed him to stay away, to maintain his distance, to allow the law to take its proper course. So Henry remained in the motel room with Louisa, watching cartoons on the small television, his phone clutched in his hand, waiting. It rang at 12:30. "It's done," Corbin's voice confirmed. Henry closed his eyes, a profound sense of release washing over him, a tension that had been wound tight for weeks, finally unwinding. "Where is she?" Henry asked, his voice barely a whisper. "County lockup," Corbin replied. "She'll be arraigned tomorrow. Assault. Filing a false report. Harassment. We've got her on all of it." Henry leaned back against the headboard, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. Louisa glanced over, then returned her attention to the screen. "What happens now?" Henry asked. "Now we build the case," Corbin stated. "But the hard part's over. She's not getting out of this." Henry wanted desperately to believe him. This time he almost did. "Thank you," he said quietly. Corbin was silent for a moment. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "I should have stepped in sooner." Henry found himself without a response to that. "Get some rest," Corbin advised. "I'll call you tomorrow." The line went dead. Henry placed the phone on the bed. Louisa looked at him. "Is everything okay, Dad?" Henry managed a genuine smile, the first one in days. "Yeah, sweetheart. Everything's okay." The arraignment took place the following morning. Henry did not attend. Corbin had advised against it, emphasizing the importance of minimizing attention and risk. However, Corbin called him afterward, providing a full account. Rosalind had entered the courtroom in a pale blue dress, her dark hair pulled back, her face devoid of makeup. She appeared smaller than she had in the diner, younger, almost fragile. Her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit, spoke in calm, measured tones, arguing that his client was a victim, that she had merely been defending herself, and that the accusations against her were exaggerated and motivated by revenge. The judge listened intently. Then bail was set at $50,000. Rosalind's family posted it within the hour. Corbin called Henry again that night. "She's out," he announced. Henry's stomach dropped. "What?" "She posted bail," Corbin explained. "But she's on house arrest. Ankle monitor. She's not going anywhere." Henry sank onto the edge of the bed, the motel room cold, the heater rattling uselessly. Louisa was asleep once more. "What if she comes after me again?" Henry asked, a tremor in his voice. "She won't," Corbin assured him. "If she violates the terms of her release, she goes straight back to jail. She's not that stupid." Henry was not so certain. "What about the trial?" 3 months. Corbin estimated maybe 4, but we've got everything we need. Surveillance records from the diner, statements from the other victims, her own public declarations. She's done. Henry yearned for relief, but all he felt was an immense weariness. "Thanks, Corbin." "Don't mention it." The line went dead. Henry lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling, sleep eluding him. 2 weeks later, Henry received an unexpected call from George. "Henry, it's me." Henry had not spoken to George since the day he was fired, and he found himself unsure how to respond now. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice flat. George sighed a heavy sound. "I heard what happened," he began with the arrest. Henry remained silent, offering no response. "I'm sorry," George said, his voice thick with regret. "I should have stood up for you. I should have told the truth." Henry stared out the motel room window at the empty parking lot. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You should have." George remained silent for a long moment. "I want you to come back," he finally proposed. "If you're willing, I'll make you head of the day shift. Better pay, better hours." Henry closed his eyes, the memory of the humiliation still too fresh, the betrayal too deep. "I don't think I can do that, George." "I understand," George replied. "But the offer is there if you change your mind." Henry hung up without saying goodbye. That night, Corbin visited the motel again. He knocked and Henry let him in. This time, Louisa was still awake. She looked up at Corbin with wide, curious eyes. "Who's that, Dad?" she asked. "An old friend," Henry replied. "Go brush your teeth, sweetheart." "Okay." Louisa nodded and walked into the bathroom. Corbin waited until the bathroom door closed, then turned to Henry. "I've got something for you," he said, handing Henry an envelope. Henry opened it. Inside was an official job offer, an administrative position at the police department. The duties included scheduling payroll and filing, nothing glamorous. But it was steady. It was safe, and it paid significantly more than the diner ever had. Henry stared at the paper, disbelief etched on his face. "You serious?" he asked. Corbin nodded. "We need someone we can trust," he explained. "And you've been out of the game long enough. No one's going to ask questions about your past employment." Henry looked down at the letter once more, his hands trembling. "I don't know what to say." Corbin offered a slight smile. "Say yes." Henry folded the letter, placed it on the table. "Yes," he affirmed. Corbin clapped him on the shoulder. "Good. You start Monday." He left. Henry sat down on the bed, rereading the letter 3 more times. He carefully folded it and tucked it into his wallet, a symbol of a new beginning. Louisa emerged from the bathroom, climbed onto the bed, and sat beside him. "Are we going to stay here?" she asked, her small voice full of hope. Henry put his arm around her. "No," he said. "We're going to find a new place, a better place." Louisa looked up at him. "Promise?" "Promise." The trial commenced 3 months later. Henry attended every day, sitting discreetly in the back of the courtroom observing. Rosalind sat at the defense table, always in simple dresses, her hair pulled back, her hands folded in her lap. She looked like a different person from the arrogant socialite of the diner, an image of demure vulnerability carefully crafted by her legal team. But Henry knew better. The prosecution called witness after witness. Callista, the housekeeper, testified about being fired after Rosalind accused her of theft. Elias, the delivery driver, recounted being banned from his route after Rosalind falsely claimed he had been inappropriate. Finn, the valet, detailed losing his job after Rosalind alleged he had damaged her car. One by one, they told their stories, each narrative painting a clearer picture of Rosalind's pattern of malicious behavior. Then the surveillance records from the diner were played. The courtroom fell silent, all eyes fixed on the screen. Henry watched the footage, a chilling replay of his humiliation. He saw himself approach the table, saw Rosalind wave her hand carelessly, saw the sauce spill, saw her stand, saw her kick him, saw himself fall. The jury watched their expressions, grim, their gazes unwavering. Rosalind's lawyer, a smooth, articulate man, attempted to argue that she had been acting in self-defense, that she had felt threatened, that Henry had been aggressive. But the undeniable visual evidence from the recording directly contradicted his claims. The footage showed everything, leaving no room for doubt or misinterpretation. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 intense hours. They returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts. Rosalind exhibited no outward emotion. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply sat there, staring straight ahead as the judge read the verdict. Then the bailiff led her away. Henry left the courtroom, stepping into the cold air, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Corbin found him a few minutes later. "You okay?" Corbin asked, his voice gentle. Henry nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Corbin stood beside him for a moment. "She's going to serve time," he stated. "Community service probation. She's not getting off easy." Henry looked at him, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Good," Corbin smiled. "Come on, I'll buy you a coffee." They walked to a different diner 2 blocks away, not the Harbor Diner. They settled into a booth by the window. Corbin ordered coffee, Henry tea. "You ever think about coming back to the force?" Corbin asked after a period of comfortable silence. Henry shook his head. "No, that part of my life is over." Corbin nodded. "Fair enough." They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Henry spoke. "I don't think I ever said it properly," he admitted. "But thank you for everything." Corbin looked at him. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do," Henry insisted. Corbin smiled. "All right, you're welcome." They finished their drinks and went their separate ways. Henry drove back to the apartment he had found 2 weeks earlier. It was small, but it was clean. It had warmth. It had space for Louisa. It was theirs. Louisa was waiting for him when he walked in, perched at the table with her homework spread out before her. "How was your day, Dad?" she asked, her voice bright and innocent. Henry hung his coat on the hook by the door. "It was good, sweetheart," he replied, a genuine warmth in his tone. She smiled and returned to her homework. Henry walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water. He stood there for a moment, looking out the window at the street below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. He thought about the diner, about the kick, about the agonizing weeks that followed, the fear, the anger, the paralyzing helplessness. He thought about Rosalind sitting in that courtroom, her face blank, her future irrevocably decided. He did not feel an exuberant happiness. He did not feel victorious in a triumphant way. He just felt an immense weariness. But alongside that weariness, he felt something else, something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like he could finally breathe. A month later, Henry took Louisa back to Harbor Diner. He had not been there since the day he was fired. He did not fully understand why he felt compelled to return. Perhaps it was for closure, a final exorcism of the painful memories. Perhaps it was simple curiosity to see if the place had changed, or if he had. Or perhaps it was merely to prove to himself that he could, that the experience no longer held power over him. They walked in through the front door. The place looked precisely the same. The familiar booths, the same tables, the lingering smell of burned coffee and old grease. George was behind the counter. He looked up as they entered, his face draining of color. "Henry," he uttered, his voice barely a whisper. Henry nodded at him. "George." George came around the counter. He looked older, tired, burdened by the passage of time and his past actions. "I didn't think I'd see you again," George admitted. "Neither did I," Henry replied. George glanced down at Louisa, then back at Henry. "Can I get you something on the house?" He offered a gesture of belated goodwill. Henry considered it, then nodded. "2 hot chocolates." George managed a faint smile. "Coming right up." Henry and Louisa settled into a booth, a different one this time, by the window far from the site of the incident. Louisa swung her legs under the table, looking around with childlike wonder. "Is this where you used to work, Dad?" she asked. "Yeah," Henry replied. "A long time ago." She nodded, accepting his answer. George brought the hot chocolates over, placing them gently on the table. He looked at Henry, a profound sorrow in his eyes. "I really am sorry," he said quietly. Henry met his gaze. "I know." George nodded and walked away back behind the counter. Henry and Louisa sat there in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their drinks. The diner was quiet. A few people came and went, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding at their table. No one paid them any particular attention. Louisa looked at him. "Are you okay, Dad?" Henry smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached his eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm okay." And for the first time in a very long time, he truly meant it. They finished their drinks and left. Henry held Louisa's hand as they walked to the car. The sun was shining. The air was cold but clear, invigorating. He unlocked the car and helped Louisa into her seat. Then he stood there for a moment, looking back at the diner, a ghost of his past. He thought about the man he had been when he walked through those doors every day, tired, afraid, desperate. He thought about the man he was now, still tired, still afraid sometimes, but no longer desperate. Not anymore. He got in the car and started the engine. Louisa was talking about something that had happened at school, her voice bright and animated. He listened. He smiled. He drove. Weeks turned into months. Henry settled into his new role at the police department, an administrative position that, while not glamorous, offered stability, respect, and a consistent income. He was a trusted presence, organizing schedules, managing payroll, and filing reports with the same quiet efficiency he had once applied to waiting tables. Louisa thrived in their new apartment, a small but clean space with reliable warmth, a haven after the transient days in the motel. The scars of the past remained, but they were fading, replaced by the solid foundation of their new life. Corbin Ward, his old partner and unwavering advocate, continued his work at the department, often sharing a quiet coffee with Henry, discussing cases and occasionally reflecting on Rosalind Veil. She was serving her sentence, her wealth unable to shield her from the consequences of her cruelty. The narrative of her downfall, once a whisper, had solidified into public record, a testament to the power of truth when wielded by those brave enough to speak it. Henry sometimes thought of Rosalind not with anger, but with a detached understanding of how unchecked privilege could warp a soul. His focus, however, remained on Louisa, on ensuring her world was safe and kind. He saw Louisa growing, her laughter freer, her questions bolder. He saw the resilience that had been forged in hardship now blooming in security. He remembered the desperate man he had been constantly calculating, constantly fearing. Now he was a man who could plan, who could breathe, who could simply be. He smiled more often, his exhaustion less profound, knowing that the most important battles were not fought with fists or words alone, but with unyielding integrity and the quiet pursuit of justice. Henry continued to build his life one steady day at a time. The apartment, once merely a place to sleep, became a home filled with Louisa's drawings, her happy chatter, and the warmth of their shared resilience. The memories of the past, though still present, no longer defined him. They were part of his story, a testament to what he had overcome, and a quiet reminder of the power of one person to make a difference. He drove Louisa to school each morning, watched her disappear into the bustling building, and then headed to his job, a sense of purpose guiding his steps. He was no longer just a waiter, no longer just a victim. He was a protector, a survivor, and a quiet beacon of justice. His story. The story of Henry Cole had become a testament to the idea that even in the face of overwhelming power and public scorn, the truth, when championed by the courageous, would ultimately prevail. And as the city hummed around him, a symphony of countless lives and stories, Henry knew deep in his heart that the most enduring legacy was not one of wealth or power, but one of unwavering character quietly built day by day for the daughter he loved more than life itself. It was the only legacy worth leaving. He continued to listen. He continued to smile. He continued to drive.